Well, hello, that's me again. Today is Monday. Happy Monday, July 10th. And I could have started our conversation today with this news, for example, which are really huge news. And this is Reuters reporting about basically people withdrawing their gold back to their own countries. As you can see yourself, countries repatriating gold in wake of sanctions against Russia, study finds, and this is the yesterday's piece of news. And I cannot even explain to you how important it is, but we will start with a little bit different story today. And I want to return back a little bit to the issue of operations, because I begin to encounter increasingly some kind of big flaws. It's not obviously the problem of people who just merely want to do it, just in the fleeting interest in the military operations and special military operation. And they are not guilty of not knowing those things, because obviously they are civilian people and they're not supposed to even to know those. But it's just merely for the buffs of military history. But also it's issue of the operations, and it's issue of the operational art. And we will start with something which is absolutely crucial for anybody who tries to observe special military operations in any sensible manner, and especially based on the more or less reliable data, that we have to get to the simple thing. And all of you know what volume is. Volume is actually the measure of the space, so to speak. It's three-dimensional measure primarily, and it's width, length, depth. You multiply it by 3 if you're looking at a rectangle. Basically, figures created by rectangles, and you will get the volume. Well, and for example, liters are the measure of volume. So, or gallon is kind of I think so, is the measure of volume too. I'm not sure, but I assume it is. If not, correct me, but because I'm not good at the English metrics. But for example, if you have 1 liter bottle, which has the volume of 1 liter, which is 10 by 10 by 10 centimeters, you cannot put there 2 liters of water. You can put into it only 1 liter or less. It will fit in this volume. It's called volume. It also is called capacity. So, and here you may ask what this has to do with anything related to operations. Oh, it has everything to do related with operations and operational art and strategies. Well, it also has a lot to do with tactics too, actually, as a matter of fact. And the point is that we get to the definition of this, and it's called operational capacity. Or if you wish to kind of substitute it, it's the operational volume, if you will. In Russian, it's called yomkost, literally internal volume of something. So what is then operational capacity? Operational capacity is the ability of the theater of operation to fit. And we're talking about the theater of operations, regions, districts, and directions, strategic and operational, which basically reflect a possible limit of their troops, their complement, and the structure of this grouping of the troops, which could be deployed there and conduct combat on those territories. It is defined, obviously, this operational capacity by the dimensions. It's usually width and the depth of and geographic positioning of the axis, usually operational axis, and it could be continental, it could be ocean, all kinds of the types of the terrain, and it also obviously defined by the not only terrain, by the accessibility, and obviously the presence of the military infrastructure on those axes or regions where you want to conduct your combat operations. This is operational capacity. And let's start with kind of reminding you a little bit, the guy who actually sort of like introduced this to a certain degree, and he was the famous geometric junkie, so to speak, of the warfare. Here he is in the general uniform of Russian Imperial Army. His name was the Andrei Antoine Jomini. He actually served as general both in Napoleon and in Russian army during Napoleonic Wars, and he wrote that treatise, which is the summary on the military art, and he was absolutely obsessed with the geometry of the war, the geometry of the warfare. And there, in this piece of the military thought, some people compare it to Clausewitz, who also actually was on the service of Russia. But this is where he wrote about the geometry, pretty much, of the combat, including the lines of defense and axis, and the fundamental issue of concentration of force on some narrow objective and things of this nature. And he even wrote some things that he was defining the distance, specific distance between, for example, storages of the powder and storage of the cannonballs, and the distance between guns and things of this nature. So, and he wrote this, and it was very kind of influential in many respects, and the guy is known as in modern warfare studies as one of the founders of the, well, if you wish, sort of proto-operational theory. But to demonstrate to you what I'm talking about, here is the Borodino battle map. This was the bloodiest battle of the 19th century. No, don't throw me the Leipzig here. Leipzig lasted 3 days. This one lasted only 9 hours, and they slaughtered there almost 100,000 people. But here, as you can see yourself, at the scale in the left upper level corner of the map, that the scale is, well, you see this line, it's 2,000 yards. If you put this all together, you will see yourself that basically in this map you can see concentration of the forces. It's more than 250,000 men on both sides, Napoleon and Kutuzov. And when you measure the area in which essentially the battle happened, you will see yourself it's probably around 2 by 3 kilometers, which is about 6 square kilometers. So you can imagine what it was when you consider also it was the first truly artillery battle at that time. And there you go. This is your sort of combat area, which is about 6 square kilometers. And when you look attentively, even at the pictures depicting it, as you can see yourself, there you go. Everything is very tight, and you have a slaughter of unimaginable scale. And when you consider the weapon systems which were used, there were the muskets which you used, and their range probably was about 100 yards at best. You can probably shoot it with any kind of aiming. And then, of course, if you look attentively at the cannons of that era, so to speak, it's Napoleonic Wars artillery ranges, and the range of the weapon system together with the structure of the force, they basically define the operational capacity of the area or the theater. As you can see yourself, the longest range which you would have at that time, you would have the Russian 12-pounder with 1800 meters, and effective range was about 600 to 825 meters. And you would have also French 12-pounder, which also was one of the most effective on the range, 825 meters. Of course, in terms of the howitzers, the maximum you could shoot at that time was through Russian Unicorn. You can shoot it almost slightly more than 200 kilometers, but again, effective is, it's completely different story. So you basically, if you kind of average all that, you will understand that the effective range of the guns or cannons was less than a kilometer. So there you go. And suddenly those 6 kilometers make 6 square kilometers at the Battle of Borodino make total sense. This is what you would have to do to start fight the battle. You just basically cram those people, those hundreds of thousands of people, and throw them at each other while artillery shoots at the basically almost indiscriminately. And as a result, well, you had about 650 cannons on Russian side, about 700 cannons on Napoleon's side. So it was a bloodiest battle. It was a mess, complete mess. So you look at around 100,000 killed, not just casualties killed. But again, the real number will never be known, but still. And then, of course, we go into a little bit further, and we begin to see the development of the weapons and artillery, and suddenly, and not only that, we also have the issue of the small arms, which now can shoot much further than obviously the 100-yard muskets. You suddenly can shoot at 300 yards. You can aim even further than that sometimes, and then bang, and you get things by the World War II like this. And this is the Soviet howitzer D1, very famous Soviet howitzer, 152 millimeter, and its effective range, I mean not maximum range, it's really effective, was about 12.4 kilometers, and it could probably shoot slightly longer than that, but it wouldn't be effective. But it's, say, okay, 12 kilometers range. This is 152 millimeters at that time. And then if you go also into the new weapon system, which suddenly begin to appear at that time, you look at the obviously thing like this, which is, of course, for example, Panzerkampfwagen 6, known as Tiger. I'm not talking about King Tiger, I'm talking about the Tiger, which was fairly numerous. And of course, it was the key part of the Kursk battle. And if you look at its feared and very advanced for that time 88 millimeter cannon, which of course was offset naturally by Russians again, but using very advanced tanks like KV and heavier tanks which could take on any type of German tank. But here it is. Here's a German 88 millimeter, 8.8 centimeter KV K36 L56 performance, and as you can see yourself, it was installed on their Tiger tanks, and suddenly you have the tank gun, not just howitzer, but you have a tank gun which could shoot at 2,000 meters effectively. And some say that in a pure ballistic mode, I mean that means not targeting tanks, but shooting at soft targets, it could shoot up to 10 kilometers. So I'm pretty sure any kind of that caliber gun at Soviet tanks could do, Red Army tanks could do this too, but it just shows you how dramatically it grew, the distance or ranges of the weapons grew. And then what you have, as you remember, for example, you have Borodino scale kind of in conclusion of the battle, when you have those 250,000, by that time it was much less because so many were killed or wounded. It cramped into those approximately 6 square kilometers. But then you go back to fast forward to 1943, July 12th, and the start of the Operation Citadel by Wehrmacht, and of course famous Battle of Kursk. And as you can see yourself, when you look at the scale, here is the scale highlighted in yellow, and as you can see yourself, the one line is upper line is 60 kilometers, 30 to the left, 30 to the right, and 40 miles, 20 to the left, 20 to the right. And when you put together this area of battle, and basically it's a whole theater, and this was operational direction, and you will see yourself that suddenly we're talking about thousands of square kilometers, but you have obviously two 3.5 million people cramped there with thousands upon thousands of tanks, with tens of thousands pieces of artillery, and you get the largest tank battle in history. And as a result, we have this Kursk counteroffensive by Soviet forces, which is called Marshal Kutuzov and Marshal Rumyantsev, one on the north, another on the south. Colossal battle, but as you can see yourself, operational capacity of the theater allowed to operate there with colossal forces, millions upon millions of troops and huge number of the hardware. So this is your operational capacity already at that time in 1943. Then we begin to roll, basically fast forward to the present time and special military operation. And then we begin to see ourselves all changes in terms of the operations per se, as such as the operational, not just theory, but also art. Why it is art, I already explained it before. But let me demonstrate to you the issue when the actually not following the operational capacity of the theater or operational strategic direction led to a catastrophe. And this catastrophe is called what is called Soviet Red Army Kerch-Feodosia amphibious operation, which was conducted in the end of 1941, and then the Battle of the Kerch Peninsula in 1942. Now look at the map of this conclusion of this battle, and which concluded in May of 1942. It was the time when Russians had the very kind of optimistic view on the development of the war, because they had dramatic success at the Battle of Moscow by not only pushing Wehrmacht back, but annihilating quite substantial number of Wehrmacht and allies. But here they basically get on the Kerch Peninsula in the end of December, and basically within few months, trying to get themselves into the rear of the Manstein's grouping, which was surrounding Sevastopol, they cram 3 armies into what you can see yourself. It's the army 44th, 47th, for some reason it's marked here not as the army but as the corps, and you have the obviously 51st army. 3 armies have been crammed into, look at this, look at the right upper corner, as you can see yourself, this is what? This is your scale. You have the scale of what it means, what it looks like, 10 kilometers. And look at this. You suddenly have 3 armies cramped at the front against the German forces, which looks like this. I deliberately measured it for you. Look what is the width of the front here. It is total distance of 10.83 miles, or around 17 kilometers. So on the front of 17 kilometers, you packed 3 armies, and you pack them thinking that you can break through. And what is the most important, you do the Red Army packed them in such a way that primarily most of the troops have been concentrated around the first line of the attack or defense, depending on how you want to look at it. And even the army staff's headquarters have been within the 10-kilometer range from the those forward position, which is unprecedented. And one of the reasons for that was also interference by Mr. Mechlis, who was at that time the chief of the main political directorate of the Red Army. The guy was obviously very courageous, but he was also very cruel and not well acquainted with the modern operation theory. And guess what? As famous and literally legendary Soviet military correspondent and writer and poet Konstantin Simonov already wrote then, when he was in 1942 sent to report to the Kerch Peninsula about the state of the army there. And here what he wrote, it was already close to the start of the Germans attacking the defensive lines of those three Russian Red Army armies. Here on the Crimean front there is now a hysterical slogan: forward everyone, forward, forward. It may seem that valor lies only in crowding as close to the front line as possible so that, God forbid, someone does not end up outside the artillery shelling by the enemy. Incomprehensible and terrible mania. And as soon as we drove 10 kilometers to the rear, we no longer saw anything. No troops, no anti-tank defenses units, no trenches, no artillery positions. From the front to Kerch, there was an empty space. Konstantin Simonov, 1942, in May. And the Red Army paid dearly for that, because Germans attacking in their divisional or corps strengths basically tore apart already confusing situation, so to speak, on the front lines for the Red Army. And they actually have been able easily to demolish the army headquarters, thus interrupting their command and control. And then of course we have this complete mingling of the different armies, which are not really controllable. You cannot command them properly, and as the result, it ended up in the strategic catastrophe for the Red Army in 1942, and it was there up to 300,000 people basically lost, taken prisoners or killed. 82,000 have been killed, I believe. The rest, the few of those remaining divisions actually retreated completely to the Kerch caverns, famous Kerch caverns, and they continue to resist there, but it was over. And as you know, Sevastopol also fell in 1942, so there you go. This is what was happening when people decided, due to number of factors, completely ignore the operational capacity of the theater of operations, and as the result, they were defeated with catastrophic results. Obviously, Red Army will try to never repeat this mistake again, and after the basically Kursk battle in July 1943, Russians have been on the offensive and doing pretty much to Wehrmacht the same what Wehrmacht was doing to Red Army. And when you look at this, you begin to understand how important it is to keep in mind that you cannot cram so many troops. And then suddenly we go to the special military operation, and guess what we get? We get things of this nature. Yeah, obviously we have these strategic Russian shovels, as you know, those laser guided and GLONASS guided with command updates, but it's those are super weapons, and just we have a glimpse of those weapons. But reality is, if you look attentively at modern day, even artillery, for example, you can see that Russians use the latest versions of them Star-S mobile artillery, which actually is capable to move around quite fast and attack from the positions, unlike it was, for example, in Great Patriotic War, when Russians have been able to cram sometime up to 250 artillery pieces per kilometer. It's literally like for each 4 meters you would have the artillery piece, but this was done very artfully before the obviously primarily offensive, and this was artillery preparation was creating complete mayhem in the Wehrmacht lines. But here we have this. Remember this D1 howitzer, 152 millimeters. This is also 152 millimeters, but it already shoots. Effective range by MSTA is 29 kilometer, and if it uses the jet or rocket assisted artillery pieces, it's 36 kilometers. So suddenly you begin to understand that the ranges grow, and so consequently there you don't need any more cramming of the for example infantry into some limited space. Then of course you look at the Koalitsia, which is of course the latest iteration of Russian long-range artillery, and this thing already using RAP, rocket-assisted projectiles. It shoots already at 80 kilometers, so it shoots actually to what would have been considered in World War II operational depth, and this is just the part of it. When you look now at the modern tanks, for example, and you look at T-90 Prorыв, this thing shoots at effective range is 5 kilometers, up to 5 kilometers by the gun alone. We're talking about the range of engaging tanks, and more than 5 kilometers with the modern reflex missile, anti-tank missile, which is launched through the barrel of the gun, of the cannon of the tank. So this is incredibly long range, which is similar to latest modern tanks in the West. And then, of course, if you go and look into some news, this is what the modern warfare allows you to do. You can take a look at the news which have been reported and have been confirmed, corroborated 11 days ago, when a Russian T-80B VM tank using, of course, the targeting from their drone and shooting from their enclosed firing position, blew up their BMP Bradley, and the distance was 9.5 kilometers. This is what modern war has become. And when you look even at the intermediate pre-SMO use of the, let's say, the operational capacity of the area, you can take a look at this thing. And this is, for example, motorized rifle battalion on the defense. Look attentively at the front of the defense, at the defense, the depth. You can see that the front will be up to 5 kilometers in width and up to 3 kilometers in depth. If you get, it's battalion, remind you, it's motor rifle battalion. This is around 600 plus minus personnel, and obviously quite a large number of the equipment and hardware. But if you multiply 5 to 3 by 3, you have 15 square kilometers, and you can literally fit in the defensive position only so many personnel, 600. Plus minus, give and take. Some battalions are larger, enlarged, and you can, in this particular case, you in this motor rifle battalion, you get additional tank company given to it. But so it battalion is 15 square kilometers. Compare this now to roughly 6 square kilometers with 250,000 Russian and Napoleon troops fighting each other. So and as you can see yourself, the area is much larger, and we're talking about battalion. And when you look also and compare to the issue of the Russian Kerch disaster, even battalion headquarters, they will be kind of removed from the first line. On a brigade level, they will be already 5-6 kilometers in depth, and once you go to the division, it's already further than that, with for example, brigade level rear services will be removed up to the 15 kilometers in depth. And so consequently, the larger is the formation, and we look at the army, and suddenly if you look at the army, even the corps level, we're looking at many tens or even 100 kilometers of the headquarters being in depth. And this begins to tell you that, my gosh, suddenly the theater of operations grow tremendously, while realistically, if compared to the issue of the even World War II, let alone Napoleonic Wars, their operational capacities begin to shrink naturally, because obviously your ranges of your weapon systems grow tremendously. And then of course we have the addition of the aviation, and then suddenly, and then of course standoff long range weapons, and bang, You have the situation when you look at the front lines of the lengths of 1,000 kilometers, like it is in special military operation, but you have around them about 300,000 men, Russian men fighting, and basically containing at some point of time around 600,000 Ukrainian armed forces, including those 11,000 now known so-called volunteers, but primarily NATO people. Half of them have been killed officially by the Ministry of Defense of Russia. And there you go. And that suddenly explains to you what their operational capacity is and why many people who think, oh yeah, let's go and, let's mobilize another 1.5 million. And the question is, where would you fit them in the modern war? That's the problem. That's what people do not understand. Again, as I already told you, battalion with the additional tank company occupies many more times a larger area in defensive. Of course, on the offensive it will narrow its front, but and you suddenly look at this and say, yeah, what is in this case the operational capacity of the area if you want to feed the army? We'll look up the army, hundreds upon hundreds, up to 1,000 square kilometers of the area. This is how armies are located. And again, the headquarters, army level headquarters, are removed far from the front line. It is a tactical and operational necessity. And when you look at this, you begin to understand why Russians are not rushing to, again, mobilize somebody else from what they already did. Where would you put them? Especially considering the fact that you have nowadays so much hardware that brigade alone, the brigade column has a length of many kilometers of the equipment just going along some highway. Now imagine this thing distributing itself into some area where it has to be prepositioned, where it has to be serviced, light service on the go, so to speak, and then it has to go into the assembly areas, and then it has to move again into the columns when it attacks, or it has to reposition itself in accordance to the field manuals where it defends itself. And that explains to you why you have to always keep the operational capacity in mind, because this is how the war works. And you cannot just throw one army into the gap of 2 kilometers or 2 miles wide. You just can't. It will not fit. You have to do it using those sub-formations, which will go in, try to break this gap, and then you will rotate them through it. Then you will have the screen forces and things of this nature. It's complex, my friends, in the modern warfare. And this is what I needed to explain to you, because without going into explaining, so to speak, the commenting on the news. And before I go, I want to also point out this thing. I read constantly this BS and propaganda from all kinds of the garbage sources in the West that Russian aviation doesn't use basically shoot and forget weaponry. It is so untrue, it's unbelievable. So let me show you again. These are from the special military operations. This is the photo of the Mi-28, and as you can see yourself, on 2 pylons and the special harness, actually, left and right, you can see yourself those white missiles. Those are famous now ELMI UR-305, which are shoot and forget, 15-kilometer range from the low and 25-kilometer range from the high, anti-tank and anti-reinforced formation, installation missiles. They are total shoot and forget, but they also can actually redirect them if you decide to do this in the semi-active mode, and they are multi-mode missiles, but they are full shoot and forget capability. And same goes not only for Mi-28s, and you can see yourself Ka-52 here, also carrying this under its wings, and they are used extensively since 2022 in special military operations, and you can see the videos of their use, including their on-board videos before they hit something, very easily. It's all over the internet. So, and I just wanted to address this. Now, this is what I wanted to tell you today on Monday. I do not want to overload you with the news constantly, because there are some things, fundamental things, which many people have to understand. And today it is the operational capacity or operational volume, including the volume of the when you go to the aviation. And this is kind of speaking in the most simple and most understandable for lay people manner what it is and how it is considered. And believe me, there are many interesting calculations which go into this. And this is what I wanted to tell you today. And I'm sure we're going to be talking because the NATO summit opens tomorrow. There will be a lot of things to discuss. And guys, this is what I wanted to tell you today. And as always, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. And those who can afford, please support me on the Patreon or buy me a coffee too. This will allow me to continue to do what I'm doing. So guys, this is it for today. Have a nice rest of your week, and I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.